the reminders of Tropical Storm Octave are still with us. On this day in 1983, the storm was beginning to douse southern Arizona with rain. What followed was one of the worst floods the area has ever seen, washing away homes and causing hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. Fox 11's Bud Foster is live where some of the flooding happened 40 years ago. And Bud, it's taken decades for some of these areas to recover.
Well, yeah, it certainly has. We're on the Sunset Road Bridge here. It was one of the bridges that washed out in the 1983 floods. Took them 35 years to finally get it rebuilt. Now, the city and the county were both very unprepared for what happened in 1983. Nothing like that had ever happened here before, but they did get one break that most of the damage here was not to property, but to infrastructure. Well, every time it clouds up, do you think of 83?
Just about. You wonder about it significantly.
Chuck Huckleberry was the transportation director during the 83 floods. It was the first time Tucson had faced anything like this. 8 inches of rain on a weekend, which washed out roadways, did a fair amount of property damage, and washed out bridges that so many people relied on.
In the 80s, we still had a bunch of Bailey bridges, which are one-lane bridges that, had no foundation, and so a lot of those washed out. I think we don't have many of those or any of those left now.
The county doesn't have any more of them because the floods of 83 drove home a valuable lesson. The county was vulnerable to a 100-year flood, and this was a wake-up call. The infrastructure needed a complete overhaul, according to Huckleberry's assistant in 83, John Bernal.
In 83, we used to have certain values that we thought were representative of what a 100-year flood was. Well, we went way past those in 83, so we had to recalculate everything.
They had to recalculate because under the old standards, Marana was underwater. People were sitting on the rooftops. What the county found, and is evident here, that the banks of the rivers washed away, allowing water to pour into Marana, and widened the banks of the Rito by another 100 feet. That recalculation led the county to begin a very expensive and very long process to shore up the banks to keep the water in its banks.
Well, it was pretty bad, and one of the things that we have done and continue to do is put in soil cement bank stabilization. So we shored up the bridges and all the banks, put in soil cement, and it pretty much solved the problem.
And in part, solving that problem led to another way to protect the banks, the loop, a bike path that now extends 120 miles. The idea was hatched as a way to make sure the banks are protected and don't wash away.
Flood protection is exactly what led to the loop. Absolutely. Without the flood protection, we'd just be putting a path along the river that would likely get wiped out with a flood. So we weren't going to do that,
Yeah, and one of the things that is a very big positive of the 1983 floods, of course, is the loop. But here's another. Anytime they build a bridge like this or any other construction in Pima County, they always keep the floods of 83 in mind. So if the rains come like they did in 83, they'll be much better prepared this time. At the Sunset Road Bridge, I'm Bud Foster, Fox 11 News.